Join me today as I read from Neville Goddard's 1966 lecture, Time to Act. We're going to review today the ways that you can actually take the information that you're learning and put it into practice and make sure that you are focusing your energy in the correct way so that you can truly live a life that you desire. Happy Monday and welcome to Unleashing Happiness. I am your host, Cecilia Hendricks, and today we're going to review our mindset motivation with one of my absolute favorite mystical teachers, Neville Goddard. If you are new here, welcome. Every Monday, I do a show for your mindset motivation, and honestly, mine as well. I like to make sure that I'm reconnecting with all of the teachings around the law of assumption, positive thinking, and really using your mental energy and the way that you're focusing on your life and the things that are happening in your life and the way that you feel about yourself for external change that is fulfilling and provides joy in your everyday. As a quick overview, I found the way that what worked for me with law of assumption or law of attraction teachings was to pair it with my own habits. So to really work on my own personal identity, the way that I saw myself and the way that I was behaving each and every day, making sure that I was aligned to the person that I want to be. And the more that I focused on that, the more that these remarkable changes started to happen in my life. I was just seeing things that I had been hoping for and wishing for start to really come together. And the more that that happened, the more faith that I had, and I could have faith in the unseen. And one of the things that has really helped me on that journey is staying connected to the teachers that I always resonated with. So one of those is definitely Neville Goddard. He is probably my favorite. I talk about him the most on this platform, and his teachings is that you become the person that you want to be, that you dwell in this wish fulfilled. And a wish fulfilled is just whatever desired outcome it is that you want to have. And so what I really like to focus on is how you can shift your mindset and shift your habits to be aligned with that ideal self, to really start to dwell in your wish fulfilled. Because the more that you energetically align with that, the more that you start to see these external happenings in your life come together. And it can be a little difficult at first to put the feeling before the activity. You really do have to believe it in. So you believe first, and then the external thing comes together for you. And so this podcast is really put together to give you my tips and tricks and share things that have worked for me to make these work and really start to see changes within my own life. And something that's been fantastic in that is that the more that I share it out with others, the more messages that I get that they're seeing these same changes in their lives, that they're seeing that when they really focus on these things, they're starting to see the external happenings come together. They're able to actually make sustainable changes in their lives by following these processes. And so I am very excited that you're here today. I am going to be reading from a Neville Goddard lecture that he gave in 1966, and it's called Time to Act. So it is from one of my favorite lecture books. I've read from it quite a bit, and I know that I've read from this lecture before as well, but I want to get a little bit deeper into it for today. But this lecture is really focused on you actually performing the activity that you say you believe. So if you believe that your mental energy is able to change your external world, if you have even an inkling of an idea that, hey, maybe what these teachers are sharing has truth in it, because we have, mystics from the past that have shared this and current folks that are sharing it. Very modern day teachers who maybe don't talk directly about the law of assumption or law of attraction are still sharing the same principles that these teachings have. And I'm hearing the same principles more and more echoed from folks that really are living a life that they absolutely love. And they're talking about the fact that they've done that by making sure that they had focus and an aim. And when you have an aim, essentially you have your desired outcome, your wish fulfilled, and you're focusing on that each and every day, you begin to align with that type of person. But if you are only taking in the information and never doing anything with it, then you're just kind of staying on a hamster wheel and you're not going to really get very far, because just absorbing the information, just consuming is not actually going to do much in your life. You may have some small areas that you're like, oh, that really worked out and I can see how this played out in my life. But unless you really start to act and you start to put your focus and attention on the things that you want, you're not going to have the outcome that you're really looking for, and not consistently. At the beginning of the lecture, Neville is talking about an experience that he had. And so he is talking about the spiritual experience that he had and the message that had come out of that experience. So I'm going to begin reading from the message. The message was time to act. That's my message tonight. Many of us think that we have radically broken with old habits of thoughts and systems of belief, and yet we find that these old things that we thought we left behind still determine our conduct. We haven't left them behind at all. Action tests belief. You try to realize how very severe a test to belief action is. We say, I believe. That's a statement that I use here all the time, and I mean it literally. Imagining creates reality. I firmly believe, I do not believe that any other cause or force will be discovered in the world. That these unseen imaginal acts are meant in Hebrews when we are told, and things that are seen are made out of things which do not appear. Hebrew 11:3. No one sees the unseen imaginal act, yet they are causative. They are producing the phenomena of life. I have friends of mine who would say, oh, I believe that, and they'll repeat it day after day. I believe that, but they never live by it, never. Imagining creates reality. The belief that is not strong enough to affect action can hardly be more than a half belief, and it is always possible to use action to test the force and the genuineness of belief. If I suddenly heard a voice and you heard it, fire, and it seemed to be coming from the only exit in this place, there isn't one person present who would not make his exit to that door. We would respond to that. It's part of our training, and that's a danger signal. And when we are told it's a fire, everyone, some would even stampede trying to get there first, but nevertheless, we would respond to it. But now, do we really live by the statement, imagining creates reality? To the point when whether we are on the subway, whether we are walking the street, whether we are at home, and whether it's the morning's mail as we received it, at that very moment when action is called to resolve a problem, do we act? And by act, I mean not going to the telephone and calling or writing a letter. I mean the imaginal act. Do we at that moment act as if we were when someone screams, fire? Is it automatic that imagining creates reality with us? For that was the message I was given. Time to act. No longer drink water, but take a little wine for your stomach's sake and for your many infirmities. Here we have stone, water, wine. And we have those who will go from meeting to meeting, year after year, absorbing more and more water, more and more what they call the truth. Water being the psychological truth. And so this one has another. Here, we'll do this water. It seems to come through a different land. This one has another flavor. You want to taste all kinds of waters. He calls upon us to stop drinking water and start now drinking a little wine. Put it into practice. Act upon what you now know and don't try absorbing all the more of the water. So I want to pause here and talk about this just a little bit. So there's a couple things that Neville's talking about. One is being that if you truly believe, are you putting it into practice each and every day? And the second is absorbing of the water and looking for different types of water. And essentially how I read this is he's saying, stop looking for different truths. So in other words, stop looking for a different technique, a different way of doing this, someone else who's going to convince you that this is truth or that you should or should not do something. And instead, focus on your own attitude towards this event. Focus on the whole way that you're looking at something, looking at your life, and if you're focusing on the solutions that are available to you. By taking the information that you have learned, so the water, and turning it into wine by putting it into practice. So stop spending your days searching for more information. And that even includes like my own content, right? You're not coming to me or someone else or any other teachers looking for constant more information. And I definitely found myself in this cycle, looking for maybe somebody who had success doing something in a different way that I had done it. And maybe if I had tried that instead, it would work for me. But I never put it into enough of a practice to actually see the results. I never gave it even enough time, energy, and focus because I was always looking for the next thing. I was always looking for the new story, a different flavor of water. So when you come into this new week and you're looking for your mindset motivation and you really want to focus on resetting your own mindset, refreshing the way that you're looking at life, completely changing your attitude towards certain events in your life, which ways are you going to do that? How can you take all of this information that you have and put it into practice right now? How can you stop yourself from seeking additional information? And this is where my kind of understanding of this has shifted a little bit, because definitely Neville says, hey, it all starts in the imaginal activity. I'm not telling you to go write a letter to fight something if that's what's going on in your life. Instead, come within and focus on the solution. And when I share that you want to change your habits to be more aligned with somebody, I don't mean by writing this kind of letter. I don't mean by checking constantly to see if your specific desired person has unblocked you on Snapchat. I mean changing your habits so that instead you do go within. You focus on your own emotional intelligence. You focus on the habits that you're maintaining that align with somebody who is drinking the wine. They are putting all of these teachings into practice so that you can have the life that you actually want. Because until you figure out how to do that, you're just going to end up on a hamster wheel, and it's frustrating. And I say that because I've been there. I've done that to myself. I've been on that hamster wheel. I've been on the frustrating part of trying to figure out how to make everything come together for me and feeling like it was just crumbling much faster than it was actually building. I'm going to go back to the lecture. I'm skipping slightly ahead, not very much, by about a paragraph, and I'm going to go back to the lecture and read part of that as well. Now act upon it. Does it really mean that I actually have an opportunity to do something in my imagination that I do it, or that I wait for the most opportune moment? I'm too busy now. You're never too busy to simply act. If you believe in the reality of that unseen imaginal act, all things are possible to God. So let's think about this for a second, because I'm guessing some of you, if not a lot of you out there, have done something where you allow yourself in the moment to dwell in the opposition of what you want, to dwell in whatever external activity, the perception that you have has happened currently, and you've allowed yourself to kind of feel those emotions, be frustrated, have inner conversations that are argumentative and really not aligned at all to this wish fulfilled, not aligned at all to your desired outcome. But you justify it thinking, well, right before I go to bed, I'll work on focusing on my desired outcome. And I say that I'm guessing quite a few of you have done this because I did it. I actually did this for quite a while, where I wanted to allow myself to feel whatever I wanted to feel and focus in a very specific way with very little mental discipline. Because that's truly what this comes down to, is a mental discipline. And that does not mean so strict that it's as if you are creating a battlefield, but you do have to reshape the way that your brain is wired. You do have to make new connections so that you focus in the way that you want to focus. And this is where emotional regulation and emotional intelligence and calming yourself tools come into play, because this is not about not allowing yourself to feel anything. It's not about denying your feelings or pressing them down or suppressing them, because then they just kind of bubble up in an even worse way. But it is about starting to question your own thoughts and feelings. It is about starting to learn how to calm and regulate yourself so that you can refocus and make an actual conscious decision on where you want to put your attention. That's the key difference here. And I have a ton of episodes on how to do that and how to focus on your emotional regulation and how to make sure that you are not suppressing your emotions, because everything that you feel, every knee-jerk reaction that you have is a key insight for you to understand where you are. So if you look at the world through states, and you can be in multiple different states, if you're a follower of Neville Goddard, you've heard of this a lot. Neville Goddard says that we all dwell in specific states. And if you want to change your state, you need to energetically change so that you're aligned with a different state. If your knee-jerk reaction is frustration and jealousy and anger and emotions that you may want to deem as negative, which I also recommend you don't do. Nothing is negative. It's all a lesson. You can learn how to be curious about your emotions and why you feel that way. But if you have these emotions that are not aligned with how you want to feel, and they're not aligned with your wish fulfilled, well, then start to learn how to calm them without suppressing them. And also understand that everything is coming through your own perception. So you have a filter on the way that you see life. You see life through your own personal life filter, your beliefs, the way that you feel about yourself now, your past events. And sometimes, like, this happens a lot. Okay, here's a good example. If somebody texts you and they say something and you read it really negative and you're like, wow, I cannot believe that they talked to me like that. But it's a very simple statement. And then you call them out. You call them and you say, hey, man, why are you so upset with me? And they're like, what are you talking about? And if they read the text to you, the tone is completely different. Those are your perceptions. That's a really good example of the way that your perception can actually create an emotion that is maybe not needed. So that's when you start to lean into, do I actually believe this? Do I want to continue to believe it? What other perceptions could I have? And although these shifts are definitely activity, you're doing something physically by working on changing the habit loop that you're stuck in with your emotional reactions, it's still beginning with your imaginal act. And so that's kind of the example that I'm using when Neville talks about inactivity, that you don't have to lift a finger, because you don't. Everything will start to naturally come to you based on the state that you're in. Your reactions, your feelings, your perceptions are all a reflection of whatever state you're dwelling in. Now, to go back to the lecture, if I act, I have met the test. If I postpone it and I don't act, I go around repeating like a parrot, imagining creates reality. And you're doing everything in the world but imagining the solution. So as we kick off this Monday, I want you to really lean into asking yourself, am I parroting this information, or am I truly living by it? Am I constantly looking for a new flavor of water, or am I giving myself wine by putting this into practice? Where am I dwelling? Am I postponing my reactions? Am I postponing my imaginal activity, or am I catching myself in that moment and beginning to work on changing my emotional habit loops? And if you are new here or need a refresher, a habit loop starts with a cue. You fall into a routine and then you get a reward. And it literally goes in a circle. And our lives, our daily lives, are really driven by these habits. So a cue can be a smell, it can be a place, it can be a person, it can be a time of day, but you have a cue that tells you, oh, it's now time for me to do X, Y, Z, and you fall into a routine. That routine can be emotional. So let's say that you drive by somewhere that triggers a bad memory for you, and suddenly you are having inner conversations where you are arguing with somebody, you're reliving the traumatic event, you're making yourself get upset. Even though this event has happened maybe 2-3 years ago, you're still stuck in this energetic feeling of being frustrated and upset. Or it can be a physical activity. Your alarm goes off in the morning, you grab your phone to turn it off, and you start scrolling your phone, and you don't get out of bed for 30 minutes and feel like you've wasted a good part of your day. So it can be a physical activity. We have tons of those. Or it can be an emotional activity where it is triggering an emotional reaction within you. And those habit loops can be interrupted by usually interrupting kind of what happens after the cue. So you can change your cues. Like if one is you waking up in the morning and scrolling your phone, and you really don't want to continue doing that, it's just not the way that you want to spend your morning, you want to focus on something different, well, then you would change that cue. So maybe you would use something else for an alarm clock, or you would place your phone far away from you, or put a sticky note on it that says, hey, we're changing. We're not going to do this anymore. And Neville says actually quite the same thing within this lecture. And he says, I ask you to please act. At the very moment that the decision is here, act. So when we say I am, that's he. Act upon it and believe it. It will work. I promise you it'll work. Stop absorbing only the psychological meaning of these fabulous stories and put it into practice, for it's time to act. So tonight, act between here and your departure is someone you know that you could really lift up in your mind's eye. And he was asked, how often must I do it? 70 times 7. Do it until in your own heart you're satisfied. Just do it, but it will come back. How often must I forgive him when he sins against me? 70 times 7. When it becomes so fixed, you only see what you want to see, then it's 70 times 7. So no matter what rumor I hear after I've heard what I want to hear, I hear nothing else. I heard it and I'm still hearing it, and I will continue to hear it until what I've heard becomes objectified within my world. So he's again telling you, if there's somebody even in your world that needs to be lifted up, see them, hear them as you want to see them. See them as the person, their ideal self, and see yourself as your ideal self, and continue to only hear and see that. And if you need to do it 70 times 7 until you feel it within your heart and you can see and feel nothing else, continue to do that. Take the water of the information that you've learned and put it into practice to the point that that is all that you are absorbed with. But do not wait. Do not try to wait until you're going to bed at night. Do not try to wait until you want to sit down at home and quietly go into meditation. When it comes upon you, act. In that moment, learn how to act. Use the emotional intelligence tools to calm yourself, to refocus. And that's all mental discipline. The more times that you do it, the more times that you bring yourself back and refocused on your wish fulfilled, your dwelling state, your desired outcome, whatever you want to call it, the more that you are energetically aligning to that, and the more that you are creating pathways within your own brain to go to that first next time. When I first started, it was very, very difficult for me to calm myself. I had not learned emotional regulation. And it was really, when I felt something, I felt it huge. I always was like, I'm just a passionate person. No, I was a person who lacked any kind of discipline. And so the more that I started to focus on calming myself and not saying this is a negative emotion, but just saying, this is not actually aligned with how I want to feel. What is my perception here? And do I want to believe it? And I started asking myself many more questions, and I used breathing exercises, and I would name the emotion to calm and tame the emotion. And the more that I leaned into those and added meditation to just my normal daily activities, as a regular habit that was part of my life, and focused on my own daily joys so that I was including happiness in my life, the more now that I am truly much more zen. It doesn't mean that I don't get upset. It doesn't mean that I don't get frustrated or feel anger or jealousy. Of course I feel those. Like, I'm human. I'm learning and I'm expanding, and I'm okay to feel those. Those all have a place within my experience. And so it doesn't mean that I never feel that, but I am able to really redirect where my focus is and where my attention is and what I'm giving my energetic attention to. And that is really the key to all of this. So I hope that you found this motivating. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will be back on Wednesday. Thank you so much again for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely please share it out with your network. That is truly one of the best compliments that you can give me. And if you have a moment, if you could please rate and review the episode, that definitely helps me get out to more people.